The 4-year cycle, which is tied to the halving that happens every 4 years, has been a somewhat reliable predictor of price going back to the beginning of Bitcoin. I've lived through 3 90% drawdowns in Bitcoin since I first started buying it in 2011. And this particular drawdown is not particularly worrisome. It's a great buying opportunity. You know, people are always saying, oh, Bitcoin at 75,000 or 65,000 is too expensive. You know, I wish it were cheaper. Well, okay, it's cheaper. So you should be backing up the truck, loading the boat aggressively. Only have money in fiat, shitcoins, or gold that you're willing to lose. Any money you have in Bitcoin is unconfiscatable, it's uncensorable. That's your only wealth. That is your only wealth, is your Bitcoin wealth. Everything else is confiscatable or going to be inflated away out of existence.
And we'll get to gold. You know, I always get to gold with you at one point. But sticking to the hash rate, why are you confident we'd see an all-time high in the hash rate this year then?
Because the network is growing rapidly and it is already about hitting a new all-time high. So it's flirting with new all-time highs as we speak already in the first few weeks of 2022. So that trend should continue because more and more miners are coming into the network because mining is a hugely profitable business. The average miner's cost per Bitcoin is under $8,000 per coin. So at these levels, it's a wildly profitable business. And you're going to see more and more countries start to mine Bitcoin. Remember, I said on your show a few years ago that I was anticipating what I call hash wars or the hash race. So right now you've got El Salvador, who's accumulating Bitcoin. They're doing Bitcoin volcano bonds. And we see a couple of other countries mining Bitcoin and adding Bitcoin to strategic reserves. I think once a country in the G7 starts to accumulate and mine Bitcoin, it'll set off like a space race that we saw in the 60s where the Soviets put up the Sputnik satellite and it launched the space race and a man landing on the moon. I think once a G7 country comes out and says, hey, you know, we're adding Bitcoin to our reserves, we're mining Bitcoin, then you're going to see other countries say, hey, we got to get in on this. The US will come in. The US will come in and start to mine Bitcoin. You've already got a lot of senators in the US right now, like Cynthia Lummis, a third, as I understand it, a third of all of her contributions coming in right now are coming from Bitcoiners. And now we've got many congressmen and senators that are into Bitcoin. We've got governors into Bitcoin. You've got the mayor of Miami. Wyoming is probably going to become a Bitcoin state. Texas could very well secede from the United States and become a Bitcoin state. So this is the power of Bitcoin. It shows you what you can do with unconfiscatable, uncensorable, perfect money. You start to think differently about the world around you and the governments around you.
Okay, absolutely. If a G7 country were to step in, that'd be a game changer, of course. But how plausible is that for you? How far away?
I think it's 100% guaranteed certainty. Because we live in a fiat money world and the fiat money world is collapsing and Bitcoin is the go-to currency if you want to have unconfiscatable, uncensorable, perfect money. You're going to go to Bitcoin. That's the choice. So, and also in this region, in Central America and Latin America, El Salvador's economy is going to be, they're going to report a 10, 11% growth. Next year, they're looking to do 20%. So now all the countries in this area are like, we're not going to let El Salvador, grow without being challenged at all. So we've got other countries in the region who are now saying, yeah, we want to jump in and we want to get in on this and we want growth as well. So in Africa and Nigeria, for example, you see huge Bitcoin adoption. Now you've got all kinds of countries in Africa who are going to leapfrog the whole 20th century build out of the banking infrastructure that has kept them essentially a colony of the Wall Street banks. They can leapfrog that and say, you know what, we don't need any of the Wall Street banks. We don't need any banks at all. We can do everything we need with Bitcoin. Bitcoin is our bank. We can save, we can transact, that's our bank, and it's growing like wildfire. So a lot of these things go unnoticed because what's happening in Central America or in Africa don't make the nightly news in America. They're too concerned about Nancy Pelosi's eyebrows or, distractions.
On the distractions, on the topic of Central banks. That was another part of the equation to your forecast, that we would see one central bank fail in 2021. What was that bank that you were predicting? And have you pushed that forecast out too, or what are your thoughts on that?
Well, they're very weak. So the European Central Bank, the ECB, is one that I said was very, very weak. But I think, you look at any of the central banks around the world and they're just in a very weakened state. The leverage in the Fed they're much more leveraged at the Fed than Enron was before Enron collapsed. So these central banks are just enormously problematic. I think the central bank in Lebanon did collapse. It did effectively collapse. So I was correct.
Right, but I believe you were calling for the ECB to collapse.
Well, Daniela, I said a central bank will collapse. Lebanon collapsed, and so that's pretty good. I put that up against any of the other predictions and prognostications of any of the other guests.
Okay, I want to get back to the pressure on Bitcoin right now. You mentioned derivatives, but what about the Fed's taper program that's revving up steam and looking to become more and more aggressive?
Danielle, you can't taper a Ponzi scheme. How many times are you going to fall for this fake news? How many times is Lucy going to pull the football away from Charlie Brown? This is the same thing we've been seeing for 20 years. The Fed threatens taper and then they loosen policy. It never happens. Inflation under Paul Volcker's time was racing higher less than it is right now. And Volcker took interest rates up to 15-16%, right? So they're already way behind the curve. Interest rates to deal with the current inflation should already be 8, 9, 10% on the overnight rates at the Fed. That's the way it should be if they were doing their job correctly. So why don't they do it? Well, for one thing, the duration risk of the Fed's balance sheet is way out on the curve. So even a 1 basis point rise in rates totally obliterates the Fed's balance sheet. They're in the weakest position they've ever been. So too with every central bank in the world. They're not going to taper, Danielle. They're going to print. They're going to announce, all we need is 1 or 2 more down days on the NASDAQ, and they're going to announce a $10 trillion bailout or more. That's the pattern. We've seen it now for 20 years. I can't believe people are still fooled by this.
Because they want to keep the stock market up.
Who's an investor in the stock market? Nancy Pelosi, senators, congressmen, insiders, market manipulators, right? Of course they only look at the stock market. That's the only gauge. There is no price stability, and employment is a complete disaster. That's ostensibly what they're supposed to be looking at, but they don't. They only look at their friends in Congress and on Wall Street. It's a rolling bailout of Wall Street, and it's a gift. Insider trading is legal in Washington. And they're cashing out. They're making hundreds of millions and billions of dollars playing this game, pretending that they're not extraordinarily corrupt. It's an extraordinarily corrupt situation. Jay Powell, is corrupt. That's the bottom line.
Do you think lawmakers, and this question was posed to Pelosi, should be banned from investing in U.S. equities or stock markets in general?
It's a conflict of interest. I mean, if I look at the news, if I go to like MSNBC or CNN, I'll see a report on COVID featuring quotes from senators who own Pfizer. And then I'll take a break and see an ad from Pfizer. Then we come back to Anderson Cooper talking about it, we just saw an ad from Pfizer, who's got on as his guest a politician who owns Pfizer stock and is passing laws that are beneficial to Pfizer. Now, this is the most shameless and corrupt scandal ever in American history. I don't think you can really point to a time in American history when you had such a shameless pilfering of the public wealth from these politicians. They're literally stuffing bags of money every day, and the media is completely culpable in this. They don't have any investigative journalism at all in America. That's been pretty much obliterated. People have to resort to listening to podcasts like Joe Rogan to get any semblance of what's going on. So this is, yes, I would say that insider trading by politicians who make the laws that impact those companies, that's a conflict of interest that is anathema to the tenets of the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. It's anti-constitutional. It's anti-American. It's people, the U.S. complains. They're saying, "Oh no, we have foreign governments interfering with our elections." Well, we have politicians in D.C. interfering with our elections. They're the corrupt ones. They're projecting their corruption onto other governments. Nobody's more corrupt than they are.